We might have smartphones and streaming, but did you know that contact lenses were dreamed up in the 1500s? Or that the lock on your front door traces back to ancient Egypt? Neolithic farmers were even drilling holes into their teeth. History isn't just dusty scrolls. But before we dive in, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more. And now, get ready to rethink what modern really means, because I'm Mike with List 25, and these are 25 inventions that are way older than you think. 25. Contact lenses. Most people think contact lenses were born in the age of plastics, but the idea was floating around long before that. The concept goes all the way back to Leonardo da Vinci, who, in the 1500s, experimented with water and curved glass to sharpen vision. By the 17th century, René Descartes offered his own theory, although his design meant sticking a tube of liquid right against the eyeball. Yeah, that one wasn't particularly popular. The leap to today's working models came in the late 19th century when German craftsmen produced full-eye glass lenses. They didn't exactly feel great, but they set the stage for everything that came after. Once plastics took over in the mid-1900s, lenses shrank, became lighter, and suddenly, contacts were a part of everyday life. 24. Stone Age Dentistry. If you think going to the dentist today is rough, try Barnard around 9,000 years ago. Yeah, 9,000. Archaeologists at this Neolithic site in Pakistan found human teeth full of tiny drill holes. They matched the cuts made by bow-driven drills tipped with sharpened flint, and people actually lived with these drilled teeth, which means the world's earliest farmers had figured out a way to deal with cavities long before modern medicine. Researchers think they may have packed the holes with bitumen, a natural tar that worked as both filler and pain relief. So far, 11 drilled molars have been uncovered, all from adult burials, making this the oldest evidence of dentistry anywhere in the world. 23. The oldest dental filling. It only makes sense that this one comes next, right? Now, we know that people in Pakistan were drilling holes in teeth 9,000 years ago, but for some reason, it took a while for us to figure out what we could fill them with. Archaeologists in Slovenia recently discovered a 6,500-year-old tooth that had been packed with beeswax. That makes it the oldest dental filling we've ever found. It belonged to an adult from the Neolithic period, and it actually wasn't a bad choice. Beeswax is soft enough to mold, sticky enough to stay in place, and it even has mild antibacterial properties. Of all the things they could have tried, this was surprisingly clever. 22. The First Odometer. Just in case you don't know, an odometer is the thing in your car that shows you how many miles you've traveled. It seems pretty modern, but the Romans were using their own version of it in the 1st century BCE. The engineer Vitruvius introduced the design in De Architectura, his massive guide to Roman engineering, and it basically described a cart that could count mileage all by itself. Every full rotation of the wheel turned a set of gears, and after enough revolutions, a stone would drop into a container. At the end of the trip, the number of stones told you the exact distance covered. That incredibly simple tally helped them lay out highways, map towns, and even keep records. 21. Rhinoplasty. Modern plastic surgery has an ancient ancestor, and it comes from India. There's a surgical text credited to Sushruta, which was written sometime in the 1st millennium BCE, that has detailed instructions for rebuilding noses. In this case, these nose jobs weren't just done to make someone prettier. Noses were often cut off as punishment, so Sushruta's reconstruction was a way to restore someone's dignity, so to speak. The method used a flap of skin from the cheek or forehead, which was rotated and stitched into place to create a new nose. It worked so well that European doctors adopted it a couple of centuries later and called it the Indian method. By the 18th century, versions of Sushruta's surgery were being performed from Britain all the way to Italy, making his text one of the most influential medical manuals in history. 20. Pipelines in China. Salt was big business during the Han Dynasty in China, and they went all in to get it. Archaeologists have found wells that went up to 600 meters or over 2,000 feet into the ground, drilled with bamboo poles strapped together in one long shaft. And when the brine came up, they already had another trick ready. Natural gas usually seeped right out next to it, and instead of letting it go to waste, they trapped it, pushed it through hollow bamboo pipes, and set it on fire to boil away the water. What was left was clean salt, produced in bulk and ready to supply entire regions. 19. An earthquake detector. In 132, Zheng Heng built a device so incredible that we still haven't been able to figure it out. It was a huge bronze vessel, rigged with dragons clutching small balls, each dragon poised over a waiting toad. Hidden inside was a pendulum that reacted to the faintest ground movement. When the earth shifted, the pendulum nudged a mechanism that opened one dragon's mouth, dropping its ball into the toad below. That single sound meant an earthquake had struck, and the dragon that dropped the ball pointed to the direction it came from. Ancient accounts have even said that the machine once picked up a tremor hundreds of kilometers away, long before anyone could bring news of it to the capital. Modern engineers have tried to rebuild Zheng Heng's invention, but none of the replicas have matched the precision he achieved close to 2,000 years ago. 18. Underfloor heating. The first Korean versions go back to about 5000 BCE and were called kudul. In essence, a fire would be lit in the kitchen. Instead of letting the flames and smoke rise, channels carried them sideways under stone floors. The stones absorbed the heat and kept the rooms warm long after the fires went out. Over time, the design evolved into what became known as ondur, and by the early Middle Ages, palaces and upper-class homes had more elaborate setups, with stone channels running beneath multiple rooms, while ordinary families used smaller versions in their houses. The Romans had something called hypocausts, and that worked by raising the floor on pillars so hot air from a furnace could flow underneath and heat the surface. But those eventually disappeared. The ondur kept going, and most Korean homes still use a modern version of the same idea today. 17. Sewer systems. When we came across the Indus Valley cities of Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, dating back to the 3rd millennium BCE, we uncovered a grid of covered brick sewers that ran beneath the streets, along with household bathrooms that emptied right into them. Archaeologists even found brick-lined latrines, complete with platforms for water jars that could be tipped to flush everything clean. Radiocarbon dating placed this network at nearly 5,000 years old, so they were thousands of years older than the aqueducts of Rome and the bathhouses of Greece. Every house could hook into the network, so clean water and waste removal were a part of these people's daily lives, not just a luxury for the elite. 16. Suspension bridges. The Inca Empire was strung together, quite literally, by bridges of woven grass. One of the best-known examples, Quesuchaca in Peru, is still being rebuilt every year, and it shows us exactly how they worked. The bridges were made by braiding the fibers into ropes, some as thick as a person's arm, then twisting those into even larger cables. The main supports were anchored into stone on either side of a canyon, while some of the smaller ropes formed the handrails and decking. Structurally, the design worked just like today's suspension bridges, only the Inca built theirs from grass instead of steel. 15. Toilet paper. I have no idea what the people in Mohenjo-daro and Harappa used, but I do know what other civilizations used, and it makes our corn husks look absolutely primitive. Let me tell you that. In parts of Europe, moss was the go-to. Nice, soft, and absorbent. Wealthier households sometimes used wool or cloth rags, which definitely beats scraping with anything hard. In the Islamic world and across South Asia, the main method of cleaning was water, often paired with smooth clay or soft textiles. But the first true toilet paper can be credited to... can you guess? China. Records from the 6th century CE talk about sheets specifically made for bathroom use. In fact, by the 14th century, the imperial household was receiving hundreds of thousands of them every year. 14. The first smart device. Timekeeping in the ancient world wasn't easy. One of the better methods made use of water clocks that measured time by dripping water from one container to another. But it had its issues. As the water level dropped, the flow slowed down and the clock lost accuracy. Then, in the 3rd century BCE, an Alexandrian inventor named Statibius came up with a fix that worked a lot like the float in your toilet tank. He added a float regulator inside the clock, which rose and fell with the water level. As it moved, it adjusted a valve to keep the flow steady, no matter how much water was left. So his clocks could measure time far more accurately than anything ever had before. 13. Rome's Swiss Army knife. We usually credit the Swiss with this one, but Rome got there first. In the 2nd or 3rd century CE, someone came up with an iron and silver folding utensil that packed everything you need for a meal into one handle. The piece, now at the Fitzwilliam Museum, includes a spoon, fork, spatula, knife, and even a pointed pick, each one folding back when not in use. It's basically a Roman lunch kit, but as advanced as today's pocket knives. The craftsmanship is impressive too. It had silver fittings, smooth hinges, and all the tools were designed so that it could lock into place. Scholars think that it was probably carried by a wealthy traveler, since silver was not standard army gear. 12. Air conditioning. Before there were fans, wires, and refrigerants, Persians built tall towers called bedgirs, or wind catchers, into their homes and used the air itself as their cooling system. Some of these towers are still standing in Yazd, some more than 1,000 years old. Each one is built like a chimney, in reverse. Vents at the top face every direction, ready to trap a passing breeze. The air is funneled down into the rooms below, while hotter air escapes through other shafts, keeping circulation constant. Some designs even push the current over underground water channels, cooling it before it filled the house. The result was a steady flow of cool air in the middle of the desert heat, all powered by nothing more than architecture. It worked so well that Yazd is still known as the city of wind catchers today. 11. Dental bridges. Okay, nobody can say the Etruscans did anything half-hearted. The pre-Roman civilization, who lived in what became known as Italy, was famous for their jewelry and metalwork, so it's not shocking that they turned those skills toward teeth. Between the 7th and 5th centuries BCE, they were making dental bridges out of thin gold bands, fastening false teeth right next to people's real ones to keep their smiles complete. And they did it so well that those smiles are still intact in some of the skeletons we've dug up. So humanity does seem to have its priorities in place. First, we started drilling to fix cavities, then we started putting beeswax in them, and finally we added the bling. Or at least the missing teeth. Whichever way you want to look at it. 10. Crank connecting rod. Engines, pumps, and sawmills have one piece of hardware in common: the crank. It's the part that turns spinning motion into back and forth motion. Without it, most machines simply wouldn't run. For a long time, historians thought the crank and rod system didn't show up until the Renaissance, when Italian engineers started placing it into saws and mills. However, the Muslim engineer Al-Jazari built water-rising machines that already had the full crank-connecting rod system in place as early as 1206. One of them used an animal walking in circles to spin the gears, which in turn twisted a crank connected to a rod. The rod moved a scoop in and out of a pool, lifting water with every swing. Another of his designs used the same principle in a piston pump setup that looks almost just like the pumps we still use today. 9. Hand grenades. Over the years, archaeologists have found hundreds of small ceramic holders shaped like little spheres or cones on old Byzantine battle sites. At first, everyone thought they were nothing more than battlefield leftovers, something like perfume bottles, medicine containers, or even beer flasks. But chemical residue tests have revealed something much more interesting: traces of flammable liquids. That means some of these jars were filled with incendiary mixes, probably related to the legendary Greek fire. And no, while a lot of people think it was just old legends, we know it existed because more than one person wrote about it at the time. The chronicler Theophanes talked about Greek fire burning enemy ships during the siege of Constantinople, while Anna Komnene, a Byzantine princess and historian, described it as flames hurled from tubes that no water could put out. Meaning, we now know that the Byzantine military already had Greek fire mounted on ships, but these handheld versions made it portable. 8. Prosthetics. I won't blame you if you picture something like a pirate's wooden leg when I say the words ancient prosthetics. But in Egypt, archaeologists found something surprisingly practical. Big toes. And not just one, two. Dating between 950 and 710 BCE, both were carved and fitted to strap into sandals. One was made from wood and leather, the other from cartonnage, a sort of linen and plaster material. The best part is they weren't just ceremonial. When the University of Manchester tested replicas of these ancient toes on people missing their own, the difference was obvious. Volunteers walked more smoothly, put less strain on their other foot, and found it was much easier to wear sandals with the prosthetic in place. 7. Vending machines. The next time you buy a soda from a vending machine, thank a Greek engineer from the 1st century CE. And maybe a bit of good old greed, too. Heron of Alexandria designed what's basically the world's first coin-operated dispenser. Except, instead of snacks, it gave you holy water. What made it work was pure mechanical genius. You dropped a coin through a slot, and the weight pressed down on a lever inside. That lever opened a small valve, letting out a measured amount of water. Once the coin slid off, the lever popped back up, and the water stopped flowing. No coin, no water. It was created specifically for the temples, so worshippers couldn't just take unlimited holy water without paying for it. 6. The magnetic compass. The first compasses in China weren't for sailing at all. They were used as tools for fortune tellers. During the Han Dynasty, lodestones were floated in bowls of water to read the flow of qi and point to the best place to build a house or bury the dead. By the Song Dynasty, the design had evolved into magnetized needles, and by the 11th and 12th centuries, sailors had caught on. They floated the needle on wood or straw, letting it spin north-south, giving them a steady guide even on cloudy nights. From there, Arab traders carried the idea to the West, where Europeans eventually found and adopted it. 5. Soap. Yep, soap made the list. So let me ask you this. When do you think we first came up with soap? I'll give you a clue. It didn't come until long after we invented underfloor heating, which, come to think of it, might have had something to do with it. Anyway, be that as it may, archaeologists have dug up clay cylinders with residue from boiled fats mixed with ash from ancient Babylon around 2800 BCE. Babylonian tablets even describe making it with water, akali, and cassia oil. It probably wasn't Dove quality, though. Most of the evidence suggests they used it less for bathing and more for cleaning wool and cloth. So we continued to stink until much more recently. 4. Rubber balls. The Aztecs had a nickname for their predecessors, the Rubber People. The Olmecs were experimenting with latex from local trees as early as 1600 BCE, blending it with sap from a morning glory vine to make something new. Rubber. It wasn't just sticky sap, but a processed elastic material tough enough to be shaped into offerings, tools, and most famously, balls. Archaeologists have pulled more than a dozen of those balls from the muck at El Manati, a sacred bog, showing rubber was already woven into the Olmec's ritual life thousands of years ago. That knowledge didn't fade with them. Rubber working spread across Mesoamerica, taken up by later cultures including the Maya and Aztecs, where the famous ball game became part sport, part sacrifice, and part cosmic drama. When the Spanish arrived, they were stunned to see it in action, a technology that had been alive in the region for more than 3 millennia. 3. Brain surgery. The Inca took skull surgery to a level that still surprises medical professionals today. For centuries, the Incas practiced trepanation, cutting small openings into a living patient's skull, and by the end of the Inca Empire, they were experts at it. A 2018 study famously looked at about 800 skulls and showed how the technique improved over time. The first examples were rough, but by about 1500, 83% of patients survived long enough for bone healing to take place. That number is even better than the survival rates from head operations from the American Civil War, where nearly half the soldiers died. How they managed anesthesia or antiseptic care is still an open question, but compared to the bloody, unsterilized field hospitals of the 19th century, the Inca knew what they were doing. 2. Umbrellas. The first umbrellas had nothing to do with weather and everything to do with power. The word itself comes from the Latin umbra, meaning shadow, which is exactly what it gave. In Egypt, Assyria, and Greece, they showed up as parasols, meant to block the sun and mark who was important enough to deserve shade. China actually came up with the first waterproof ones, adding wax and lacquer to their paper parasols so they could keep the rain off. Europe, of course, turned it into a fashion accessory for women, until an English traveler named Jonas Hanway broke the mold. He walked the streets of England under his umbrella for decades, and people teased him so much that men started calling their umbrellas Hanways. It caught on, though, and umbrellas finally became an accessory for gentlemen, too. 1. Sunglasses. Spend too long in the Arctic sun and you'll find out the hard way what snow blindness is. It's basically a sunburn on your cornea, and it can leave you stumbling half blind in a world of ice. The people in that region, however, turned that problem into an invention. The Inupiaq, Yupik, and other groups came up with snow goggles, carved from wood, bone, or whale baleen, with narrow slits cut into the front. Those narrow slits cut the glare so effectively that a 19th century pair from Alaska could still pass as serious eyewear today. One set from Bristol Bay was even decorated with glass beads along the frame. And even better, those slits focused the light like a pinhole camera, actually making distant objects look clearer. So yes, from baleen to bone, the oldest shades on Earth came out of the Arctic. And that's a wrap. But before I totally wrap things up, I've got a quick trivia question for you. Who built the very first odometer? Was it A, Leonardo da Vinci, B, Hero of Alexandria, C, Archimedes, or D, Vitruvius? Pop your answer in the comments below, and let me know what invention you think deserves more credit today. And hey, in that vein, if you think inventing something means that you'll get rich, oh boy, think again. Our related video, 25 Unlucky Inventors Who Never Got to Cash In on Their Inventions, proves it. The people behind some of the world's biggest breakthroughs walked away without a single cent. That link's coming up in just a moment. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching. Like, share, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you again soon. Adios.